Did you know that the adult brain continues to have plasticity throughout life if we feed it new experiences? A simple way is from different perspectives, from seeing more around you. To me, a sense of wonder creates a new experience as well. As physicist Richard Feynman said, there's this tremendous mess of waves all over in space, which is the light bouncing around the room. And it's going from one thing to another. And it's all really there. But you gotta stop and you gotta think about it. About the complexity to really get the pleasure. And it's all really there. The inconceivable nature of nature. I share this quote because it inspired me to really begin to share how I see. My name is Stefanie Atkinson. I'm a visual artist and I see sound. And since I can share that with you, you can too. I always see the light bouncing around the room, and I felt that if I could just capture a fraction of what I see around me and share it, I could show others to see a little more. We all can. You just have to know what to look for. My earliest memory is standing right up close to the TV set. I would wet my finger and I would touch the screen and watch the beautiful colors. And I was standing so close so I could hear the TV and I could feel the TV, and I loved the light. My mom saw me doing this and understood I was having a hard time hearing. I was 2. I was losing my hearing. Fortunately, it was just temporary. My girls are 8 now. I remember the day they came home from school and they were so excited to tell me all about the 5 senses. They ran in, "Mommy, Mommy, we see with our eyes and we hear with our ears," and I'll stop there because I feel like we all know the rest. But that perception that so many of us have from learning this truth, it's so limiting. We see with our eyes and our brains. We hear with our bodies, our brains, and our ears. Actually, there was a boy named Ben Underwood who saw with his ears and vibration like dolphins and bats. He taught himself to echolocate because he didn't know he couldn't. And there are blind photographers who photograph light more beautifully than the majority of sighted people. Peter Eckert is one of them. Evelyn Glennie, she's a deaf percussionist, and her life mission is to teach people to truly listen. Some people think if people are deaf, there's like silence or white noise or something else, but I have no memory of silence. I could feel vibration. I could see vibration. I could see sound, especially if I squinted. And I made thousands of music videos in my mind, and I thought if I could just record what I see. So just before my children were born, I began sensory integration therapy as an adult, possibly due to the hearing issues that I mentioned. I met with Mary Kawar and Rita Montes, who are sensory integration specialists. They immediately saw that I had fusion issues. My eyes, like deaf was a problem for me. My eyes also skipped around, so reading was a challenge. I could only focus on one thing at a time. And while the focus that I'm describing is in my eyes, it's in the brain. It's a part of it. So they decided I would benefit greatly with the help of listening therapy. So vision therapy, core work, which included a lot of spinning. And eye tracking was part of my vision therapy. Well, given that I'm a photographer, I went out every morning and photographed birds, and I would track them. It was a walking meditation for me, and I was also doing my sensory therapy at the same time. It was around that time that I met Alan Fish. Alan Fish is a friend of mine. He's the director of the Golden Gate Raptor Observatory in San Francisco, and that's when I met him at an event. And he emailed me the next morning, and he said he was a new fan of my bird work. He told me that the past 80 years bird photography has been the same. I was really reminded of that at the National Association of Nature Photographers conference. I was in a very crowded room. There must have been about 400 photographers in there, and I was sitting in the back, and everyone was like writing notes, paying very close attention, like all weren't wanting to learn how to take those great pictures of birds. There was a National Geographic photographer at the front saying, "You have to put the camera on a tripod. You must shoot at the lowest ASA possible. Use a 300 to 400 millimeter lens." Teaching us to constrict our minds and imagination seems to be common practice without even knowing it. So in the last 80 years, as Alan pointed out, they're sharp and still. He teaches hundreds of volunteers every year to identify raptors migrating past the Golden Gate as part of a bird count. They rarely look like those sharp pictures when they're soaring by. And he taught me that raptors likely see faster than us. Like, wow, what would that look like? And another little fact that got me thinking, a lot. There's this expression, hawk-eye view. I've asked hundreds of very smart people what they think that means, and I usually get the same answer. They're sharp, it's zoomed in, oh, the hole. Actually, from way up there, they see in the UV spectrum. Therefore, what they would likely see is a tiny little neon line of mouse urine, which makes total sense that they would see it from all the way up there. There's bees, reptiles, reindeer, peacocks, butterflies, and other birds can see ultraviolet, along with other species. So let's look at the visual spectrum. Well, I should say the human visual spectrum. So let's look at the electromagnetic spectrum instead. Every species sees and hears in its own variation on this electromagnetic spectrum for its own ways of being in the world. No two species are the same. So when we even try to imagine what it's like to see as another species or be as another species, we can only barely scratch the surface. And it's usually based on our own experience, like imagining our perspective of like flying, like when I talked about the bird, we can imagine flying over the land and looking out the window like without the plane, you know, and like feeling the wind and it, you know, like that's just the simplest part of the equation, the smallest part. Like we have, as humans, we have a way of putting our experiences and perceptions on the world around us and onto every other species and each other as if we all relatively see the same way. And I believe if we all truly valued and had empathy for our fellow species, as some cultures and people do, then we would have a very different world. Every species is here with its own unique set of ways to navigate and survive. Evolution. Neuropathways in the brain created for survival. I'm reminded of that when I think about what I learned while at the Galapagos. You know, there were these land iguanas that got there, like on some chunk of land, and another chunk of land, like years and years later, like floated across. And the first set would not let the second set on the land, so they became sea iguanas. New neuropathways were created, evolution. I'm reminded of learning that Einstein used 8 to 10% of his brain. I keep thinking about that. And I keep thinking how we see about 8 to 10% of the spectrum. I wonder if we can use more of our brain now that we have the ability to access more of the electromagnetic spectrum through advanced technologies. I can't help but see the correlation in my mind between those two things, since seeing is one of the largest ways we input information about the world around us. 8 to 10%. As photographer Louis Schwartzberg said, it's like 1 octave on the grand piano. Well, that's like 1 octave of 1 instrument in the symphony of life. I heard that people who are colorblind may have a shift in the spectrum toward UV light, ultraviolet light, as opposed to missing something, they have something else. It all makes me wonder. And then when it comes to seeing, there's just so much. It's like about perception and it's colored by emotion. There's just so much to it. So I keep going between seeing and the brain because it's all connected. And I even heard that the web now has about as many connections as the human brain. It's like, whoa, like think about that. I could go on and on about this stuff, but back to my photographs. People often tell me they've never seen anything like some of my work. And they want to know what it is. So here's a good example of an image that gets that response. Sometimes children know what it is. This is water on my hand. My hand is wet and the sunlight is highlighting the water. Being that it's hard to tell what it is, I decided to take a little video clip to show my hand. So here's my hand. Now while making the video, I got really lucky. The neighbor turned on the power tool next door. I'm not holding the power tool. The vibration of the tool is carried on the air, and these 2 drops that are hanging down off my hand are being affected by that sound. Did you see that? Did you hear that? Being that we're made of so much water, it's no wonder that sound affects us. Like if someone yells, we feel it. My sensory integration therapist, Rita, she uses that clip to share with parents of kids of autism to help them understand the sensory overload their children are picking up, which we can't always understand when we don't hear and see what they hear and see because it's different. I also have another visual sound clip that I would like to share. And it shares some work I did with Bubblesmith Sterling Johnson and musician and sound healing practitioner Timothy Seridas. Some of my newer work involves photographing sound itself. The intersection between art, science, and technology is where I'm most drawn to, and I'm very interested in connecting and collaborating with people also full of wonder in other disciplines, scientists, physicists, people involved in biomimicry. I wonder, what if we teach kids that our senses are experienced in many other ways? They are fluid, and instead of looking at conditions, we understand that it's a different mind with different gifts for a different purpose. And what if we really teach that our species and all others evolve and can continue to evolve throughout their lifetime, individually and collectively, and our human potential is unlimited? And what if we could truly understand that visible light is only a sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's only the human sliver? I feel we could learn so much more about all the other species beyond, like whose brain is bigger. What if we could hear the subsonic tones of whale songs and be bathed in that sound daily? We would learn remarkable things from them. And what if we could see the sound of dolphins, like something I dream of capturing? In the words of Carl Sagan, my greatest teacher, I find it elevating and exhilarating to discover that we live in a universe which permits the evolution of molecular machines as intricate and subtle as we. Thank you.